Welcome to this podcast of Super Special Kids and Cake. Yes, cake. I'm Granny Rhea.
And I'm Auntie Donia.
We're coming to you from the studios of Sacred Heart University in Fairfield, Connecticut. This podcast is brought to you by our book, Let's Talk, Navigating Communication Services and Supports for Your Young Child with Autism, published by Paul H. Brooks and available from Amazon.com.
As you know, every week we introduce a super special topic. These topics concern things that excite or aggravate us about trends in the field of special education. We may have some ideas that others don't always agree with, but we really do enjoy discussing them. Our super special topic for today is bilingualism. Bilingualism is the acquisition of two languages at the same time, typically with both languages introduced prior to the age of 3. It's really interesting, Granny Rhea, that 66%, so that's 2/3 of the population, actually grow up bilingually.
That's amazing.
And that's from the Associated Press.
And that's across the whole world, right?
That's across the whole world. That's right. That's right. And you have some children that may grow up with the two languages from birth, and there are other children who may have what we call sequential bilingualism, which is where they begin to learn their first home native language, and then later on, as they go to preschool or to school, they then learn the second language. And the first language is usually referred to as the L1, language 1, and the second language is L2.
Right, or sometimes the first language is referred to as the mother tongue or the home language. So there are lots of different ways you might hear it talked about. I guess the question for us, Auntie Donia, is what has this got to do with super special kids? How does bilingualism affect super special kids and their families?
That's such a great question, and I get asked that all the time because I work in different countries where many of the children are actually educated in English-speaking schools or a second language other than the home language. And it's really important to first say that if a child is a super special child, that they can learn more than one language, and that there are many advantages to doing that. And often, families are told that that's not something that they can do and that they should stick to the home language or the host language, as it's sometimes referred to. But we do know, and this has been both from my clinical experience as well as, we know this from the research as well, that children are able to acquire more than one language. If they have a language difficulty, then they will acquire it with equal ease or difficulty.
Yes, that's what I've read too, Auntie Donia. And the other part of it, though, is that when parents speak to their children, they're not just saying words. They're expressing a deep range of emotions and bringing to the words a great history of their own lives and cultures. This was brought home to me in my own family when my kids were first born. My husband is a fluent speaker of Russian, and I really wanted him to speak Russian to the kids because then they would learn two languages and that would be an advantage. But he said, I can't speak Russian to them. I need to talk to them the way I talk. I need to express myself to them. Because for him, Russian was basically an academic language. It was where what he had done his schooling in and what he did professionally. But it didn't have the emotional resonance for him that he could bring to talking to the children. And that has always stuck with me about the importance of bringing the full range of your entire self to talking to your child, so that we feel that talking to your child in the home language is really important because it makes the child part of your life, your culture, your family environment. So even if children are going to have to learn a different language when they go to school, we believe children should speak and hear the home language at home. They will learn as much as they are capable of learning of the school language when they get to school, and having a home language in which they're richly immersed does not do them any harm, and there's quite a bit of research to support that at this point.
There is, Granny Rhea. Something else that I wanted to just share with our listeners is that a bilingual household can also be where one parent speaks one language and the other parent speaks another language, and therefore the home language is bilingual. So it's not just that when the children go to preschool that the host country language is a different language. And again, it's advised and recommended that each parent uses the language that they are most comfortable using. As you said, Granny Rhea, there are many terms of endearment that would feel far more natural in the first language of the parent than the second language. And one of the things that I've seen some families do, for example, is that they'll read the same story, but once in one language and then in the other language. Or if, for example, dad's doing bath time, he'll do bath time in German and mum will do bath time in Arabic or in English, whatever her native language is.
But the important thing is that when the child gets to school, they really should learn the language of the culture in which they're living. So if parents speak Spanish at home and the child goes to school, the child should focus on learning English in school, because it's the language of the culture in which the child is living that's going to a great degree determine their economic and vocational opportunities. And we certainly don't want to cut kids off from those opportunities because they don't adequately learn the language of the mainstream culture they're living in. Hopefully, they will maintain their home language, but they do need to acquire that school language as well. And once the child gets to school, whether it's a super special child or a typical child, focus in school should be on the language of the main culture. Do you agree?
I do agree, Granny Rhea. It's important that we establish a language of literacy. So the child will continue to be bilingual, but initially we teach literacy in the strongest of those languages, because any bilingual child will have a language that is stronger.
Yes, that's very true. And English, or the language of the mainstream culture, may not be their strongest language, but it should be their academic language, and there should be at least some literacy in that language. We're not saying they shouldn't have literacy in the home language, but literacy in the mainstream language is very important, and we want to encourage it.
That's right. And once it's established, then you can go ahead and teach literacy in the second language as well.
Yes, and many parents do that through outside of school activities, or they do it at home. It's not going to be impossible for the child to learn it. It might take a little bit of extra effort.
But I think we just want to make sure that you know that that second language is valued, that being bilingual is actually an advantage. It is not a disadvantage.
Absolutely, for many, many reasons, not only in terms of brain development, because we do know that people that speak two languages, once they get aphasia, sometimes one language is preserved and they're able to continue communicating in it, even if they lose a more recent language. But also for economic opportunities, it's always a great advantage to be able to speak it to people from different places, regardless of what your vocation is. So we're really very much in favor of helping children who start out as bilingual continue to be bilingual and literate as much as possible.
Our super special question for today was asked by a parent that I work with, and she wants to be able to travel with her family, but she's so concerned that with either a plane journey or a long car journey, that it's something that would be so difficult. What would you advise, Granny Rhea?
Well, I want to acknowledge, first of all, that it is difficult. It's hard to take any child on a long trip, but it's especially hard to take super special kids because sometimes they have additional needs that are difficult to accommodate. One of the hardest things that we deal with is, I think, the use of seatbelts, particularly in the car. Now, I am a huge seatbelt advocate. It's also the law that, at least in the United States, children wear seatbelts whenever they're in a car. But really, the risk of not wearing a seatbelt is so much higher than other kinds of problems you might be facing that you really should just insist that your child wear a seatbelt. And kids will protest. Super special kids will protest, and so will typical kids. But if there's one thing that you stick to your guns about, I would suggest that you make it seatbelts in the car. Because there really is so much danger involved in not using them. So some strategies for helping kids use seatbelts. Auntie Donia?
So a couple of different things, both in terms of using seatbelts and appropriate seating, as well as just making that car journey easier. So we know that if we pair a space or a place and the child knows that that's associated with fun, then they're more likely to sit. So actually, this is a time when I would say, if they have an iPad or a tablet where they like to watch movies or games, that's absolutely fine. So they can be in the seat with the tablet in hand, or their bunny or their blankie, something that they really love. So that would be what we would sometimes call clinically their reinforcer. So something that is highly reinforcing. And actually using the language where you're telling them what you want them to do as opposed to what you don't want them to do. So we're going to get into the car. That's it, in your seat. Well done, lovely sitting. Let's buckle up, giving them lots of hugs and kisses for that, and really praising them for what they're doing.
Right, and I think long car rides, or perhaps plane rides as well, is our one exception to minimizing screen time. This is a time when screen time makes a great difference. So let them watch it as long as they will sit for it. And also, as Auntie Donia was saying, you want to use that as a reward. So they don't get to watch the video until they're fully buckled in. And that way they begin to associate the buckling in with something that they really enjoy.
And we've often spoken about priming, so that's preparing your child for what is going to happen. So if you're going on a long car journey and you're going to visit family, then sharing the photographs, taking pictures so the children know that they're going to get into the car, that there'll be a little break for snack, and then they'll arrive. If it's a train or a plane journey, I would also recommend a social narrative, so where you take the photographs of the different expectations that they will have so that they know there will be some waiting time. They will have to go through security. They will have to wait to board. And then once they're on the plane, that again, the expectation is to sit down and to put their seatbelt on. And if you can practice that, do some pretend play around it. But I know that with my super special children or kids, who are nonverbal, using the images is very, very helpful for them.
Yes, and that's a great suggestion to use for lots of kids. In addition, you want to make sure that if you are in a situation where you're doing a lot of waiting, you have some things planned to do during the waiting. You want to prime the child for waiting, as Auntie Donia said, and then you also want to have some of those simple games available that you can do together while you're waiting. So I often play I Spy, where we're standing in line and we look around and we have to tell the other person something we see by describing it, and they have to guess what it is. Or if you have a nonverbal child, you can describe things and have them point to what they think you're describing. I also like to play 20 questions for kids that are over 3. And really, you can make it very simple, where you just say things like, I'm thinking of an animal, and the child has to ask you questions like, does it have 4 legs? Does it swim? And if they have trouble with that, then you can just provide some hints, saying things like, well, Granny has one of these. And so it just is a way of keeping their mind occupied during some otherwise dead time.
And I would also suggest packing a special little bag just for the journey. So including, like Granny Rhea said, it could be some of their favourite games. It could be their favourite books. I know that for my little nephew, he loves having his bunny with him. Some children like to have a blankie with them. So just making sure that you have those available to you, the little snacks, the water bottle. And I'm sure, super special parents will prepare these things anyway when they're on an outing, but really thinking ahead for those times when, with traveling, I travel a lot for work. There's often downtime, there's often waiting time. And as long as you're prepared for that, then that's really important.
Yes, I think being prepared is the key, and understanding that there will be times when you're going to have to devote some extra attention to the child so that they can get through these difficult periods. But we do hope that families won't limit their opportunities to spend time with extended family members or to go to places that will be fun and interesting for everyone in the family simply because of anxieties they have about the super special child.
And I do know that there are airlines now that if you contact them ahead of time and let them know that you are traveling with a super special child, they will make allowances for that. They'll allow you to go through security faster, they'll allow you to board earlier. And I just want you to keep in mind that sometimes boarding earlier isn't necessarily the best for you to do, depending, I mean, you know your super special child more, but if they have to wait longer on the plane before takeoff, that can actually be more challenging than getting on closer to the end and settling.
Yes, you might want to elect to get on last rather than first. And believe me, they won't take off without you if you're there in line.
But I've travelled with many super special kids over the years, both on planes, on trains, and we would really encourage you to try it. I think we're often afraid of things, but when we try them, it can still be difficult, but it's not as difficult as we perhaps had perceived.
Especially when we've prepared and are ready for many of the contingencies that will arise.
Granny Rhea, what is the topic for this segment that makes us go, aargh?
Well, I'll tell you what mine is, Auntie